Good morning and welcome again. Thanks for being with us for the November Coffee Talk with Counselor Connect. We are excited to be talking today about pathways to success for undocumented students. And this session will be recorded. So if for some reason you do have to pop off early, or if you want to go back and revisit any information, you will be able to do that, as this will be in our content library. Today, we are excited to have Iris Sanchez with us. And I'm sure, Iris, you'll do a little bit of introduction once you get started. But today's slides are linked here. Iris did share that there may be a few updates to her slide deck. So I will actually send out via email the most current version of her slides after the session today. So if there are a couple of things that are different, don't worry, we'll get those sent out to you. So with that, I am going to stop sharing so that you can go ahead and share your screen and get us rolling.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Edis. It's actually Iris is pronounced Edis. So in Spanish, I is the E, and then the rolled R, and then the other E. So it's Edis. So I just tell everyone, think about Edis ice cream, and then you can never get my name wrong because it kind of sounds similar to that. And yes, I just emailed Amanda my new slides. So I had done one version of this presentation, and then I went back and tweaked it and hopefully made it better. So this is the better version, I would say. I'm Edie Sanchez. I'm the Director of Hispanic Serving Institution Initiatives here at Purdue University Northwest, as like we like to say, HSI Purdue. So we are the largest Hispanic serving institution in Indiana. So we are very proud of that. We just got our designation. So we do our best to serve all our students because our interest is in overall student success. And when a student succeeds, all our students succeed. So we are very adamant about that. I grew up here in Indiana, actually in Cedar Lake in Southern Lake County, where my family was the only family of color back in the 80s. So it was a very interesting bringing up, some 4-H and doing all the things. I went to Valparaiso University, which now in hindsight, I'm like, man, I wish I knew what I know now, and I would have gone to a community college, and then I would have gone to a 4-year college. But I was first gen, so there was no one to tell me otherwise or kind of show me the path on what to do. But luckily I figured it out. I had a few mentors along the way, and I've been in higher education for over 20 years. I worked previously at Ivy Tech Community College in Lake County for over 20 years, and I've been here for 3 years. So higher education has been, I guess, my specialty, and before that, nonprofit. So but that's just a little bit about me. So I'm here today to talk about different pathways for success for our undocumented students or DACA students. And as we know, in the state of Indiana, it's a bit more complicated than other states to kind of help our students find that path and that direction, and help them to get into college and to graduate, and then where to work with this degree, correct? Those are kind of all the barriers that we have coming along the way. So we'll discuss a little bit about that.
Please come to the office. Alexis Carter, please come to the office.
And we'll talk about different things involving that, like immigration and other issues. So, and please feel free to put questions in the chat as we speak, because I want this to be kind of an open dialogue, and anything you might have a question on, please let me know. Okay, let's proceed. Okay, undocumented, there are nearly over 100,000 undocumented students, which those are the only ones that were kind of counted, because we know counting in census and counting undocumented people in our country is very difficult. But according to this studies I found, there are nearly 100 undocumented students who graduate from high school every year, according to the Migration Policy Institute. Undocumented refers to students who are not U.S. citizen or permanent residents of the United States, who do not hold a visa or reside in the U.S. and who haven't applied for legal residency in the U.S. But not in all cases, the term non-citizen refers to undocumented students. So there's lots of ways you could be undocumented, and we'll go into that a little bit further. But you could have been documented coming into this country and then all of a sudden find yourself undocumented. So we'll discuss all those further in my slides. So when talking about undocumented students or to document, drop the I word instead of using illegal, which lots of people use or still use, using the word undocumented is a better choice. Dreamers is also another term that has been used for this population of students, excludes undocumented students. So it usually just includes DACA students and doesn't include undocumented students in there, and that whole Dreamers with the DACA Act, and which we'll also talk about. So just kind of a little bit of a context. In 1982, the Supreme Court ruled Plyler versus Doe that all students have a right to free public education K through 12, regardless of their immigration status. After that ruling, 33 years, undocumented students and families continue to face educational injustice across the nation. So our nation is still a long way from ensuring that all students, regardless of their immigration status, have access to K through 12 education, as well as tuition and financial equity. And that especially is true once you pass the high school level. So we might have some sort of equity in K through 12, but then when you go on into college, there's some states that ban undocumented students from going to college, like Alabama. If you're undocumented, it's illegal for you to go to college. So, and there's some states that have those, and it's very unfortunate. So rules and policies are different in each state. So nationally, we only have a few things that protect our students. Statistics. So there are about 450,000 undocumented students enrolled in higher education. They represent 4.3% of the estimated 10.5 million undocumented students overall. About half of them were brought here before the age of 12. So that's where DACA comes into. 81% attended public institutions, while 19% enrolled in private colleges and universities. 5 states with the most undocumented students in higher education were California, Texas, Florida, New York, and Illinois, which is no surprise, right? Because that's where we have the higher concentration of Latino students living. So Latinos we're a younger population, and I think on a whole, and this is just my personal view, we want an educated workforce, right, in the future. And if these students are the future of that workforce, wouldn't it be smart to have them educated, right? So they can, especially in healthcare, there's so many jobs and people needed in healthcare. It'd be, I think, in the best interest of our country to educate our young people that are going to be entering this workforce and taking care of us in the future, right? So this is kind of why it's so important, and this topic is just kind of like a hot topic, right? And why, in the high school level and junior high, why this information is important. Misconception. So not all undocumented students are Latino. I know, like, we as Latinos, because I am Latina, and I use the term Latina, and my further slides, I'll explain the whole term for Hispanic versus Latino versus Latinx versus Latina, all these terms. But because our border is so close, we're right here, we get confused with all the undocumented people are Latino, and we're not. So 46% are Latino because of the closeness of our borders, and not all of them are Mexican either. There's lots of Guatemalan, Nicaraguan, Venezuelan, lots Central and South Americans are also undocumented, not just Mexicans, right? 25% identify as Asian, so there's a big community of undocumented Asian students. 15% identified as Black, 10% identified as white, and 4% identified as other. So there's lots of I've met several European students that come over with their families on a tourist visa, and then they overstay their visa, and then they become undocumented themselves. So there's lots of different ways that you can be undocumented. So people are like, oh, wait, why? Like, I'm like, well, it happens, So moving on. So misconception, not all undocumented students were smuggled across the border. So lots of people have that conception, but as we said, yes, many were brought over as minors without visas, and they did not have a choice. They came with their parents. Their parents came in the pursuit of a better life, and they didn't have any choice in the matter, and they were brought over with their parents, some as infants, some as toddlers. So lots of undocumented students that are Latino that speak Spanish don't speak Spanish because they were brought over to this country and they were never taught their native language, and all they know is the United States. From the moment they have notion of words and of life, it was always the United States for them. So some of them have no clue that they're undocumented until they're older. When, it comes to things with licenses and other documents and trying to go vacation or visit some other country, then their parents let them know, oh, well, you're undocumented and you don't have the same rights as other people or your friends, and things are different from you, right? And some, in other cases, came over with a visitor's visa, like I said, and they or their families overstayed the visa and therefore became undocumented. So you could come from any country with a tourist visa, and you decide to stay with your family and not go back when your visa is stamped to say to go back, and then you become undocumented. So you make that choice at that moment to stay in this country and not be able to go back to your country until you find a legal pathway, which we'll talk about, which is difficult to find a legal pathway to become a legal permanent resident or a citizen. And then some students, in some students' cases that do come here as international students, they overstay their student visas and then they become undocumented because they overstayed their student visa. They come here on lots and lots of international students do this. Overstay their student visas, and then sometimes it happens that they fall in love and then they are able to fix their status through their partner. But these are just some of the misconceptions and some of the explanations of how a person can become undocumented and not be aware of it, or make the choice themselves or have their parents make that choice, right? And the case too of visas, like when your parents bring you over and you come and visit a country, it's they're ultimately making the choice for you again to stay in this country. Barriers. So for you saw a large percentage of Latino students who are undocumented, and lots of them, a good majority of them speaking Spanish as their native language, access to Spanish or other native language materials, and especially for the parents. I know at my university, we have our website, we have PNW en Español, we have guidebooks, we have our view books, we have all the important pertinent information that is needed for parents and students translated into Spanish. And I know lots of colleges translate lots of material into other languages, not only Spanish. So barriers, access to materials in their language, visibility, right? Kind of knowing that there's someone like them at those universities, and knowing there's someone that they can go to. Sometimes at some universities, you don't see a familiar face. You don't see representation of yourself at universities. Parent educational levels. So lots of our parents, we do have a population that's educated, but then we have lots of parents that are not educated. So they've never gone through their college process even in their country. So it's really difficult for them to guide their students along in this process. Access to technology. There's still a big digital divide where, they don't have access to laptops, they don't have internet at home. They may have it on their phone, right? But it's different to have it on a different level of having access with laptops and Wi-Fi and all of that. Lack of financial resources, that's the really, really, really big one, because DACA and undocumented students do not qualify for financial aid in the state of Indiana. State of Illinois is different. They have an alternative FAFSA, which we don't have. And there's just a lot. Also, we'll talk about in other slides, they have to pay out-of-state tuition, which is a lot. I mean, here with us, out-of-state tuition is more than $12,000 versus in-state tuition is $8,000. So that makes a big difference. Again, but in some states, they do qualify for in-state tuition, like in Illinois. undocumented and doc students are able to pay in-state tuition. Family responsibilities. These students have to contribute to the household sometimes, have to work jobs, have to help with their siblings. It's a big family responsibility that kind of weighs down on our students and sometimes can be barriers for them to go on to college or to have the time to be able to do well in college. And first generation students, absolutely most of these students, if they're not first generation students here, or if their parents went to college in their own country, they're definitely new to the whole system here in the United States. So they are first generation students in this country. Access to Indiana driver's license or card. They have to drive illegally. Something that was happening here in our area, since we're so close to the Illinois border, was that families were living here in Indiana because it's less expensive to live here in Indiana, but their driver's licenses were in Illinois, because in Illinois, as an undocumented or DACA, you are able to access a driver's license. But they weren't able to enroll their kids in school because they had an Illinois driver's license, but they lived in Indiana and like rented. So that created a big problem where we had lots of young elementary, middle school and high school students that weren't able to enroll in school, and lots of things had to happen to to kind of mediate that issue. But that's one of the issues that is created out of that. And unidentified and misunderstood IEPs and ILPs. I think, especially I speak for the Latino community, there's not enough conversation about IEPs. And if their student is doing poorly, they just think that they're just not a good student. And then the parents don't know how to advocate for them. And especially if there's a language barrier of not being able to communicate to the educator, the teacher in their language, and just being embarrassed, to approach them in the first place, that student is going to go through their life without having that dealt with. Like, I've been, explained how long I've been in higher education. I didn't know about IEPs, and my daughter in third grade was identified with it. Her teacher came to me, and then I was like, "What is that?" And that was all new to me as well. And I'm first generation. I was born here and went through college and worked in higher education. That was the first time I heard about it. But if that teacher wouldn't have identified it and talked to me, and if I wouldn't have had all the tools I have, I wouldn't have been like a good advocate. Like, now she's in high school, and she was doing so poorly this semester. And I'm like, no, what happened to all your IEPs with modified tests? And I went in there with parent-teacher conference, and I said, no, she needs this, the study guide. But I'm able to do that. But I thought about like how many parents are not in my situation and can't advocate for their students. And then their student goes through high school thinking that they're not smart when they are smart. It's just that they learn in a different way. But since this isn't common, or in my community, we don't know this is really an issue that we see now at our college students having difficulty on the college level, because the IEPs, ILPs were never identified. So that's something that I feel very passionate about, that, at the high school level and elementary, junior high, we could do a better job of identifying and trying to speak with the parents and explain that, so they can get that assistance, so they can be a student that excels and is confident and what they are doing, on an educational level. That would make a world of difference when they come to the college. Let me take a pause. Is there any questions so far? I just didn't want to like keep on going if someone had like a question.
Not so
Okay.
far in the chat.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Please feel free to stop and put a question in the chat if you have any questions, because I tend to talk fast, so I'll try to slow down. How to support. So these are different ways we could support our students. Provide hope and encouragement. Reassure undocumented students that college is possible, because it is possible despite all the obstacles, and we'll talk more about that. But I assure you, I have students who have graduated as undocumented students, are working, that are in the process. And they are just the most grateful, the most successful, the most intelligent students, because they really work hard and have to work for this, right? make information and resources available to all students. Don't require students to self-identify in order to access information. Many students will be scared to reveal their immigration status, maybe some of them because their parents are really afraid of it and they instill that fear in them. So they're not as open to it. There's other parents that educate them like, oh no, try to see what information you can get, or so every case and every family is different. Be open-minded. Don't make assumptions about who may or may not be undocumented. Undocumented youths are, like I said, are not all Latino. They're not all Spanish speaking, or enrolled in EL classes. Involve parents, educate the parents of undocumented students as to the benefits of a college education. So involve the parents in anything and everything that their child is in, wherever you can have them support. You'll find out that lots of Latino parents, they're super supportive. They really want their student to do well. They want them to go to college. They want them to succeed. Some of them have this notion that they need to go right into the workforce because they believe they can't go to college and do something bigger and better. So really try to reach out, help create lasting support networks that can offer ongoing mentoring and advice for undocumented students. So if you have students that have graduated that were amazing students, maybe you can have them come back as mentors and be kind of that buddy to that student to help them get through this process. And especially if they want to go on to higher education, to be that person like, you can do it. This is what I did. Share their stories, have them come back. Reach out to organizations, community groups that can support undocumented and immigrant youth. I know in our area, we have a nonprofit that gives scholarships to undocumented students and DACA students, and that's our sole purpose. They fundraise, and then they reach out to us and they ask us, hey, is there any students that we could support with scholarships? So community groups, organizations, nonprofits, they're an excellent source of support, especially in that financial component. Identify role models, undocumented youth or college graduates, like I said, to come back and share resources and be advocates for them. Support pro-immigrant federal, state, and city legislation, such as Federal Dream Act, which who knows what's going to happen with that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the slides. Stay informed and updated about immigration education, legislation changes that will affect youth and their families and communities. That's always important to know, so you could share that information, because sometimes that doesn't reach our community, or they don't exactly understand what comes out, because it's the federal government has a certain way of explaining things that is not like on a 101 basis, right? It's a little bit more complicated to understand. Identify scholarships that don't require citizenship, residency. Dream.us is an excellent source. Also in my slides, I have a QR code that takes you to a scholarship database that my students and I created. I think it's over 1,000 scholarships, and it's and in the tabs it has scholarships are specifically for DACA, for undocumented, and then for all Latino students. So you can go in there and pull out those scholarships. We add, every time we find a new scholarship, we add to that database. So it's on that QR code, and it's an Excel spreadsheet, and it's open to everyone. And we just continue, and I think you can edit. So if you wanted to add anything that you find in there just to the greater cause, you can as well. But we continuously every year add to that scholarship, and then we check the ones to see if they're not in place anymore as well. So that's an excellent tool to have. And then encourage dual credit courses and how they can be used. I'm such a huge advocate for Ivy Tech Community College. I mean, not only because I work there, but because they do such amazing work with their dual credit. All of them have it at the high schools. If your high schools offer dual credit with Ivy Tech, it's free. Please, please, please have them take advantage of that dual credit, because that's free. High school, especially for an undocumented student, you don't know what that means to them. Like having those free courses. I had a student that I got in her ear like early on, and she took all the dual credit possible. So when she came to college, she already had 2 years of college courses done. So she went into her junior year, just super bright. So she only had to pay for 2 years of college. I was able to help her do a bunch of scholarships. So she was able to go and finish her degree in the 2 years and have some financial help and have payments. And that was just amazing for her. So I highly encourage dual credit is like the best thing that can happen to them. And the 8-week course model that Ivy Tech has that we're, because most of them, well, all of them will have to work, being able to do 2 courses in the first 8 weeks and 2 courses in 8 weeks, or 1 and 1, depending on how much they have to work, leaves them with no debt, lets them be able to work and pay off their education and still continue to go on with a college degree. And I'll discuss that a little bit more. But in Indiana, at least, that's like a really good system and tool that we have. Establishing direct lines of communication with students and families in English and other languages. So directly reaching out to those parents, especially if you have a bright student, or a student is bright, they're just struggling and things, is reaching out to that parent and seeing how they can support and how you can support that student better. Okay. Admissions process. So when they're ready to apply for college, so institutional policies on admitting undocumented students vary from institution to institution. So at a private institution, you'll see that it's more flexible, but I highly do not encourage private institutions because it's so expensive and they're going to be in debt until the day they die, like I am from Valparaiso University. Even though I had some scholarships and financial aid, like I'm still paying student loans. So even though the admissions policy and they offer some scholarships but ultimately you want to see, you want to look out for them at the end, right? The end goal. And the end goal, they might graduate, they might have scholarship, but they're going to be in such debt. And we really don't want that stress for our students. And public institutions in Indiana, state policies are very rigid. So, and there's only a few minor things institutions can do on their own because we are state funded. I know at my institution, at least with DACA students, because they temporarily do have a legal status, they do qualify for merit-based scholarships. So if they have 3.0 GPAs or above, they can qualify for our $1,000 to $3,000 scholarship every single year, as long as they maintain maintain that same GPA, and our institutional scholarships. So on our scholarship universe, when they come in and they fill out applications, they can qualify for institutional scholarships, but unfortunately not financial aid, not anything state aid related. And different institutions vary, but in Indiana, we're pretty much the same and the same guidelines. The private institutions are the only ones that can really, they're more flexible than what we can do. So Indiana, we charge out of state. So like I was saying, $8,000 for in-state tuition for us, and it's $12,000 for out of state. Same for Ivy Tech. Their in-state is like $4,000, and I can't remember right now off the top of my head what the international rate, but it's pretty up there too. I think it's between 8 and 10 or 12, I want to say. And then does the university already have resources and policies directed toward undocumented students? So that's our institution, the merit-based, like, so those are some of the resources and policies. And then we have my office, the Office Hispanic Serving Institution Initiatives, where we connect students with my scholarship database, with the scholarship in the community. So we really try to, with dream.us, with kind of informing them, instructing them. We have a dual admission process with Ivy Tech Community College, which lots of four-year institutions do, where we say, okay, you could be our student, but here, go to Ivy Tech first. If you have dual credit, take that with you. You can be our student, their student at the same time, graduate your 2-year, and then we'll come up with the best plan then to support you here when you come here to finish your degree for the 4 years. And then is there a point person admissions, or that a student counselor that can contact with questions? So here, our financial aid team, we have lots of ladies, wonderful ladies that are bilingual, that we always put our students in contact with the parents to kind of discuss, that they don't qualify for the FAFSA, kind of explain that whole situation and what their alternative is to like payment plans. And they send them to me for scholarships. They come to my office because they know have all the resources to kind of help guide them and connect them during their college journey here. And I speak to the parents and I talk to them about the best plan. And I always, if they're undocumented, I'm like, your best bet is to go to Ivy Tech, start there. Or if your child is interested in a trade, or, I kind of give them the whole scenario of like what the cost would be, how this would work, how they could be debt free. But some students, like if they're really good students and they're set on being an engineer, I'm like, okay, well, let's try to do as many classes at Ivy Tech you can and then transfer you over here so you don't lose as much time. A lot of them are in 6-8 year plans. You see in the trend, especially Latinos, they tend to graduate not in 4 years, but 6 years to 8 years. It's a higher graduation rate at the 6-year mark than there is at the 4-year, and then at the 8 as well. So this is a kind of a long-term commitment, higher education. And then citizenship questions. So they don't need to provide a social security number. So when they're asked, they can answer no on these questions on applications, on college applications. So they do not need to disclose that or provide that. No one does. They just put no. If they ask them if they're a citizen, if you're a lawful permanent resident, do you currently hold a valid USA visa or another valid immigration status? And DACA IDs don't qualify. And are you seeking a visa to study in the US? They don't have to answer any of these. There's lots of colleges put other, and they could put themselves as other and not put anything else. So they would say they're not a citizen, of course, but they can put just other, like leave these blank and just put themselves in the other category. And admissions, they already know if they're in the other category that they may not necessarily be an international student. They're not a US citizen, but placing themselves as other, they don't have a social security number. That just protects them as they're not saying they're any of those things, but they're just putting themselves into another category and not identifying. And that's perfectly legal. Just as long as they don't put that they're a US citizen, say yes to any of those things. They just leave it blank, say no to the social security number, and put themselves in the other category. And every university is different, but most of us all have this kind of standard where you can put the other. What should undocumented students ask colleges? So on the other end, when they're looking to go to a college, they should ask, do they have a dual admission program with Ivy Tech? It's kind of like we do, that has like a seamless process of transferring from community college to the four-year institution. Does the college or university admit undocumented students? Because like I said, there's some states that don't. Does the institution have a policy regarding whether or not it will report undocumented students? They shouldn't, but it doesn't hurt to ask. Will the institution consider undocumented students for institutional or private aid? So like I said, at our university, they are considered for institutional aid. Private aid, it depends on the donor of the scholarship, whether they allow undocumented or DACA students to qualify for their scholarship. So it's always great when someone can look into that. And like I said, there's outside scholarships. Is an undocumented student eligible for merit aid? And our institution, we do. Does the institution offer any special scholarship for international students? Can undocumented students apply for these scholarships? So sometimes these students are considered international students, and sometimes they're able to qualify for these international scholarships, depending on the university. Does the application ask for a social security number? And then it's a good question to, most of them do, some of them don't. And like I said, you could put no, and you don't have to provide that. If a student does have a social security number, should they use zeros or leave it blank? If a student does not or cannot answer all the questions on the online application, will it be submitted, or do they need to complete a paper application? So on the online application, oftentimes like these social security number things come up, and then they can't move on unless they put something in there and they have the US citizen and all those. So those questions can be kind of a little overwhelming. So sometimes, most of the time, they feel more comfortable coming in person and talking to someone and doing a paper application or having someone along there with them to make sure that they are being protected when they're doing this application. Does the major require a background check? So obviously they can't do a background check because they don't have a social security to provide a background check, because some of these cybersecurity, criminology type majors sometimes ask for background checks, because some of them go and do internships in the prisons and different things like that. So, and then also when working with in the education degrees with young toddlers or babies, like with kids, there's often and you're going to work into the schools, you're also, well, you all know, you're asked to do the background check. So does the major lead to certification or state licensure where an undocumented student might be eligible? So they might be doing a certain certification in cybersecurity or in something else, but you have to be a resident to be eligible for this. And so why have them waste their time in doing this when they're not going to be able to use it? Correct. That's kind of the thing sometimes where, okay, I'm paying all this money for this, but then I'm not going to be able to use it because I need a state license where I need a social security, you need to provide social security number. So it's really important to look ahead into all the little details of whatever they're going to be studying and what it's going to require, like background checks with state licenses and everything like that. Are advisors and career development staff aware of these issues? So, yes, counselors, the people who help with the students going on to college or looking into what careers, are they aware of all of this, what we just talked about? Because all of this makes a difference in what exactly they're going to choose to study, right? Because they might think they want to do one thing, but then they look into that they have to do a background check, that they have this, that they have that, then that might deter them from wanting to do this. Or in the state of Indiana being able to do this, maybe in the state of Illinois, they would be able to do some of these things, but not here. So it's really important to have all that information. Paying for college. So how can they go to college, right? If there's no financial aid, they don't qualify for financial aid. If they have to pay out-of-state tuition, which is very expensive. If they don't qualify for a lot of scholarships. Dual enrollment, we talked about being dually enrolled with community college, and then coming in, finishing at a four-year institution, public, preferably, just because it's not as expensive and we don't want them to be in debt the rest of their life. So like I said, Ivy Tech has lots of wonderful partnerships with many of the four-year institutions, encouraging that dual enrollment process. So they're not wasting any time. They're taking all the classes that they need to take at Ivy Tech that will transfer seamlessly onto their four-year, because they're paying out of pocket for all these classes. So we don't want them to take something that they didn't need, which ends up happening to lots of college students. But being involved in that dual enrollment where you have the transfer specialist from the four-year and the person at Ivy Tech working hand in hand to develop that course work and what they need to do to graduate there and then get into the four-year institution is the best route. Dual credit, can't stress enough how important, if they're a undocumented student and planning to go to college, to take advantage of all the dual credit they can at high school. Every class counts that they can use, so they don't have to pay as much out of pocket. And we all know, like, the first year or two of college is all those required courses, the English, the maths, the communications, right? GoFundMe, lots of students have their own personal GoFundMe, or some other people, family members or people in the community set up GoFundMes. They're very successful in lots of cases. On-campus jobs. So in Illinois and some other states, they're able to pay through, there's like different foundations that allow students to be paid on campus for on-campus jobs, where they don't have to report. It's like a stipend that they receive and that gets deposited into their account. So some universities are able to do it. I haven't found a way to do it yet. Others said be doing it, but some universities have the capacity of being able to and especially in Illinois, this is definitely something that most Illinois universities have found a way of offering on-campus jobs to their DACA and undocumented students, where they work on campus and then receive a stipend for work. So that'd be something to look in at their university that they might be enrolling in. They might have something like that or a capability. Scholarships. There's lots of scholarships available that are open to anyone. That doesn't exclude them. And like I said, on the QR code, that's where I have my big scholarship database that we keep on adding to. And there might be local scholarships. Like, local scholarships are the best. I always tell my students, be involved in the community, do community service, get involved in the Lions Club. I mean, that's like where you're going to find the most substantial scholarships, because lots of students then don't know about them and they don't apply and they have lots of money left over. And if you're in there volunteering and doing all the good things, like, good things will come to you and you'll be able to qualify because they know you for these scholarships. So local scholarships are also a great source of funding for our students. And then small business, LLC. So lots of my students have their own little small business, and this is how they've been able to fund and help themselves pay for college. So they go to these little pop-up farmers markets, and they're selling jewelry, they're selling this, they're selling lemonade, they're selling food. Like, they're out there trying to help pay for their college education by having their little small business, and they pay for the LLC, and they're running their small business and helping themselves get through college. So that's another one, like the ones that are more ambitious and really want to get an education. A lot of my high school and current college students are doing this. And college is possible. So undocumented students can go to college. They're not alone. They can find a college that fits them best. So it might not be a community college, it might not be a four-year public, it might be a private institution, it might not be in the state of Indiana, it might be in another state, but that's our job to help them, right? Find that college that best fits them. There are resources. You just have to find the right people that can connect you to those resources, right? They qualify for some scholarships. There are scholarships out there. Laws are changing. Well, that was when I was more on the optimistic before the elections. But we hope in the future there might be a pathway, and there's always hope, right? I always tell my students to have hope. Like, things are constantly changing in our world, in our country, and and you can make a difference. And okay. Do I have like 15 more minutes left, or I was like, okay.
Yep. 14 minutes. Yep.
Okay, so I'll try to go through these slides more quickly. So there's no federal or state law that prohibits the admissions of undocumented immigrants to the U.S. colleges, public or private. Federal or state laws do not require students to prove citizenship in order to enter U.S. institutions of higher education. So House Bill 1042 2011 passed a law that bars state college and universities from offering in-state tuition. So that's what we have here in Indiana to undocumented students. And then the federal government did not pass comprehensive immigration reform that will provide a pathway to citizenship for undocumented individuals. So Senate Bill 135 proposed bipartisan legislation would make it easier for undocumented students who complete their K through 12 education in Indiana to access higher learning. One of the three bill authors, instead of a future with scant opportunities. So that's something that was proposed that didn't make it to kind of offer the access to higher learning in Indiana. It didn't happen, but I know it's going to be proposed again in the future, which, I'm not sure. But what we have right now in our current state of Indiana is we can't offer in-state tuition to undocumented students because of this House bill. This is kind of a map of state laws and policies on access of higher education for immigrants. This is a 2022 one. But as you see in Alabama, South Carolina, those states banned enrollment of undocumented students. We have the ones in the light kind of pistachio green states with tuition equity laws. and the lime green, states with tuition equity policies at major institutions. And then in the green, states with tuition equity laws and scholarships. And then in the dark green, states with tuition equity laws or policies and some state of financial aid. So you've seen Illinois, right? I mean, this is what kills us, because we're right here, like literally 10 minutes from the border where I'm at, and Illinois has all these amazing things. They have FAFSA for undocumented students. They have their own form of FAFSA. They have in-state tuition. They have all kinds of scholarships, all kinds of help. They have implemented like this health program where undocumented students could go through it, and then they could get jobs in the healthcare field. And this is all, you know, where they go through the whole process, they graduate and they have a job that they can legally work in with their status in healthcare. So it's amazing, like some of these states, how progressive they are in these things. And then pink, states where some college systems deny enrollment. So that's Georgia right there. So that's just kind of an overview of our nation right in 2022. I expect to see lots of changes, more to the red and the pink as these years progress. I think we're doing well, and I think now things with the election shifted. So I think this map is also going to shift with that, with the current dynamic of politics. And what resources are available? So these are just a few resources that I find useful in helping my students, that I go to and refer to all the time. So these are in my slides. And then a little really quick, just immigration 101. So US citizens are natural born in the United States or naturalized, or they take the test and they become US citizens. Legal permanent residents are people who have green cards. They have a legal path, like maybe their parent was a citizen and they brought them over legally and they became a legal permanent resident, and they have to wait 5 years to become a US citizen, to apply for citizenship. They have a sponsorship, or they have like a lottery system, but that's, you know, they were in their country and they were brought in legally through the proper channels. Like if you marry someone and you're a legal permanent resident, you can do it like within 2.5 years to 3 years to become a citizen, but most have to wait 5 years. And other forms are temporary protected status, TPS, like lots of Salvadorian students have this. DACA, which we'll talk a little bit about really quickly, VAWA, Violence Against Women Act, where then you could have a pathway to becoming legal in this country, a refugee, persecution, fear, asylum. So lots of Cuban students, students from South America, sometimes from different countries within Africa, have this refugee or asylum status. So there are lots of different ones. And then the Venezuelan students that currently are here, they have a whole different other thing that's kind of like a temporary protected status. DACA. So this is kind of more non-existent. So this was 2012 Obama executive order. Applications ended 2017 under the Trump administration. There's no new applications. So all these students that were able to take advantage of DACA, which was before, like all these new students aren't and won't qualify there. And these students who still have the DACA still every 2 years have to pay $495 for this renewal. And DACA students, to have this renewal of DACA. And DACA students, they're not eligible for financial aid. They're eligible for in-state tuition. They're eligible for certain scholarships and private donations. They're eligible for work permits. They're eligible for driver's license. But they cannot travel outside the United States. So they do have Social Security numbers, DACA students. So they come with the work permit. When they apply for it, they get a work permit first, which is their Social Security number. And they can then apply for a driver's license. They are eligible for in-state tuition. And most states, but they're not eligible for financial aid, and they can't travel outside the United States. Undocumented students are not eligible for financial aid. They have to pay out-of-state fees. They're only eligible for certain scholarships like we spoke about. They're not eligible for work permits. They can't get a driver's license. They can't travel outside the United States. They can't vote. So they can't get a job. Like basically when undocumented students work, they work for cash. because they are not able to legally work in this country. So that's why lots of them opt to be small business owners or have jobs like in kitchens or different places where they just pay them cash. And legal permanent residents or citizens are eligible for everything: financial aid, licenses, travel, voting, except for legal permanent residents can't vote, only citizens can vote. What is Latinx, Latina? So Latinx and Latina are basically higher education terms or more scholarly terms. Our communities don't identify with Latinx or Latina. They don't even know what that is. We identify, just talking for my community, as who we are. Like, I'm Mexican, so I would identify with Mexican. My friends, they're Guatemalan, they would identify themselves as Guatemalan, or Mexican American, Guatemalan American. And then if I have to identify myself in the larger scope, I would identify myself as Latina, not as Hispanic. And I'll go over why Latino Hispanic words are different. But it's a personal preference for everyone. But the majority of our population does not know what Latinx and Latina is. Latino refers to people from the Spanish and Portuguese speaking countries of Latin America. So this side of the hemisphere is what we are. Hispanics are people from countries who were colonized by Spain. So Hispania means land of the bunnies, actually. If you get down to the nitty gritty of it, in my Spanish degree from BU, I learned that. So it's what was used in the census to identify our population was Hispanic, Hispania, but you'll see the majority of, if we have to be labeled in something, it would be Latino or self-identifying from our country of origin or our parents' country of origin. And undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic, right? That's what, I try to boost my students to have that confidence and, being afraid of who they are and tell their story, because I think telling their story is their power, right? It's going to help them open the doors for some of them. But also to be careful, right, in certain areas, but definitely to be unafraid. And that's, thank you so much. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Hopefully you found it helpful.
Thank you so much. I found it to be very helpful, and I'm sure everybody listening did as well. If anybody has a question, please feel free to add it into the chat. I did ask one question just about the post-secondary institutions, and I know you showed that map then later on, but whether or not do the majority of the post-secondary institutions accept undocumented students, like in our state?
It's a state law, so we do in Indiana. It's those
Okay.
law, like Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that not all the institutions, or if it's a state law, then the public ones don't, but their private ones do. 'Cause private is always a different ball game. They can do whatever they want.
Okay, and that's what once you got to that map, I thought, okay, that helps with that, answer that question probably for the most part. So, okay, thank you very much. I am going to share my screen just very quickly and just share some other upcoming events. But while I am doing that, if anybody has a question they do want to add to the chat, please feel free to do that, and we can get to that before we close today's session. Did you see one?
Yeah, Bailey has a question about her student in a visa, was struggling with the idea of applying and affording college because, well, yeah, they have the choice. So if she's here on a visa, she has to be here on a student visa. So even if she's here on a regular visa, she wouldn't be able to apply as an international student because she has to be here on a student visa. So colleges check that there's a system where they have to have that student visa in order to admit them as an international student. So that student would have to be entered as an undocumented student, and then kind of, the resources that are available are the ones that I spoke about, of like outside scholarships, of maybe going to Ivy Tech and doing, all those things. That's what that student, they could not, because they don't have a student visa specifically, even though, they're international, they have to come from that country directly and have all that paperwork filled out to be considered an international student. So I would not even recommend trying that. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. If anybody has anything to add, or Bailey, if you had anything to add to that question, please feel free to do that. As I share here, we have our upcoming next coffee talk in December. We will be hearing from Flora Jones with the Department of Education. She'll be kind of giving us an update on the high school redesign. So if you're interested in learning about what the current status is at that time, please feel free to join us for that. And you can register using the link shown on the screen. If you would like to fill out a very short evaluation form and get then receive a PGP point for today's attendance, you can fill out the very short evaluation link shown here, and then you should receive that certificate via email shortly after you complete the session evaluation. Some other upcoming events I just wanted to share. The ISCA conference is this Thursday and Friday. If anybody is planning to attend that, we will be sharing a resource roundup session on Thursday morning. And then Thursday, following the last breakout session, we are just kind of gathering in the hotel lobby restaurant. So if anybody wants to just do a meetup, a very informal meetup, then we will be there around 4 o'clock. Other upcoming events, these are, I believe, all virtual. Most of them are free, with the exception maybe of one of those. So if you want to check out any of these, you could click on the graphic shown on the slide, and that will take you to the registration page and more information. Finally, some resources. And then last is our contact information if you want to reach out or have any follow-up questions. And I'm going to check the chat again to see if we do have any other questions. You seeing any?
No, I don't see any more.
Okay.
But thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you so much.
Having me.
Thank you for joining us. We appreciate the information, and thank you for sharing your email in case anybody thinks of any questions after the fact. And otherwise, I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.